Hi guys, welcome back to my channel and welcome back to my next installment in my Palette Roulette series. For those of you who are new here, my name is Donna, and for those of you who are not, thank you so much for continuing to support my channel. Thank you everybody for choosing to click on my video today. I know that you don't have to, so it warms my heart so very much that you do. For those of you who are new here, this is my Palette Roulette series in which I use an app every single week to choose a new palette for me to use. My palette collection is pretty extensive, and this series was inspired by Dani from her channel Danibo, who does a palette a week series in which she uses an app to choose a palette that she uses for the week, and at the end of that week she chooses whether or not she's going to declutter that palette. For me, this is not really a declutter series. I do have a quite extensive collection of palettes, but for the most part, all of those palettes have come to me within the last year. The oldest palettes in my collection, this being one of them, might be, a year and a half old. There are a couple other palettes in my collection, a couple Smashbox palettes in my collection that might be really old and need to be decluttered, but I can't quite do it yet. But this is more, for me, about just getting some use out of the products that I have. You all know, if you're as makeup obsessed as I am, as beauty obsessed as I am, that you continue to bring new items into your collection pretty much on a monthly basis, and sometimes the older things in your collection just fall by the wayside and you forget about them. This is not an item that I ever forgot about. It is one of the first palettes that I purchased when I first started this channel. I started August a year and a half ago, and December about a year ago I did decide to purchase this palette for myself. I got a gift card from my son and used it to help me purchase this palette, and I really loved it back then. I'm not going to go into the swatches of this palette because there are just so many shades in this palette to swatch, and I do have a video up in which I am using this, and I believe I swatch every single shade in that video. I will go ahead and link that video up here, but even still, this is an LTO. LTO. I say LTO because at work it's limited time offering. This was a limited edition palette that you can't get anymore unless you're going on, say, Poshmark or somewhere like that. So I'm not going to swatch everything because it doesn't really matter, to be honest. I will tell you some standout shades. I absolutely love this purple. It is just a beautiful deep purple, and its name is Worship. I really love this color here in the palette. It's called Sacred Heart, and it is just this really pretty peachy, sheeny color. I really enjoy that. This one here is called Rosary, and it is just a really pretty, just that rose colored shade. It is this one here in the palette. Before I get too deep, let's just talk about the palette really quickly. So this is, of course, the Kat Von D Saint Sinner Palette. And when my app chose this palette last week, I did go over a little bit about the fact that, yes, I know Kat Von D is part of the canceled culture here on YouTube, but I still have Kat Von D products. I am not a person who chooses what makeup to buy and what makeup not to buy based on how I feel a person is making poor choices in their life. Whether I think that they're making poor choices or not, that is none of my business. It's none of my business to help them make the choices for their life. So I don't really have like a canceled thought process. I don't. But with that being said, I loved this palette when it first came out, and I can tell you I don't feel the same way about it now. This palette is a beautiful palette. All of her palettes, the artwork on the palettes are her own. It does have a saint side over here and a sinner side over here, and it opens really weird with this big circle with her, her monogram in here being the piece that holds the palette together. So you open it up and both sides of the palette do have a mirror. So I'm going to flip it around and this is what it looks like inside. This being the center side and this being the saint side. And you can tell right down the middle, it does separate them right down the middle as these are the more angelic colors, the softer colors, the prettier colors, I think. And these are the more grungy colors, the louder colors, the colors that most people might say are not daytime appropriate. I will tell you, I wear these colors any time of the day. I don't care what time of the day it is, and find all the colors to be beautiful to begin with. The palette on the back does have all the shade names on it, and then it gives you like this little information blurb down here. So this palette is supposed to expire in 9 months. Maybe that's the problem with my palette. It has a weight of 1 gram per pan. There are 24 pans of shadow in here, so you're looking at 24 grams of product and 0.04 ounces per pan. It is a vegan and cruelty-free company. So opening it back up, I already shared with you some colors on this side that I really truly love. I have to say, the only one that I absolutely cannot stand on this side of the eyeshadow palette is this one here called Crucifix. It is this deep brown color that you would think would be helpful for any palette and would help create a more versatile palette with, you know, the crazy color scheme that's going on in here. But I find that that brown just does not blend very well at all. I also, on this side of the palette, really loved all of these colors. This one, Exodus, doesn't really show up on my skin very well. I don't know why, but once blended out, it just kind of, let's see if I can swatch it. It just kind of fades away to like this really lackluster yellow color instead of the bright green color that's in the pan. That's really what I was wanting when I purchased this palette. Really what I loved about this palette was that bright green shade right there. I have a pretty large affinity for the color green, no matter what shade of green it is. So this color here, this Martyr, is a really pretty like dark forest green color, and it's kind of like duochromy. It's really, whoops, sorry, am I blinding you with those mirrors? I'm so sorry about that. I really like the dark side of this palette as well, but the darker shadows in this palette anyways, I have a really hard time blending out, and that the same can be said for a year ago when I did get this palette. So while I say maybe, you know, that 9-month expiration date is the reason why I had a hard time with this palette, I really don't think it is. It might just be me because, you know, a year ago when I got this palette, I wasn't very good at blending. But now I think that I'm pretty great at blending and I'm still having a problem with it. So maybe it's me, but I want to blame it on these shadows. These two shades here are topper shades. There's nothing really significant about either one of them. One of them is just a whiter topper shade and the other one is a pinker topper shade. I did like these in the very center of my eye looks, but other than that, they're just straight up glitter, if I have to be honest. So unless you are using a glitter glue, those two shades, those two toppers are going to be all over your face. So there wasn't, I use this one a lot as a crease color. I use this one a lot as a base shade, so going over a primer if I put a primer on. Or I found that they did blend better if I did have a base shadow on underneath, whether it was wearing a primer or not. So I would use this one and this one as those base colors a lot. I use this one in my brow bone a lot because there's not really another brow bone shade in here. This one could be, as a matter of fact, I do have it in my brow bone today, but it is just a tad bit dark for a brow bone shade. This one is a really pretty color as well, but it's like a taupey color and it's performs on the eye like a matte, even though there's quite a bit of glitter and shimmer in there. So once you put it on, the glitter just kind of goes away. Same with this one here called Revelation. It is kind of an orange brown with a gold fleck in it, and that gold fleck just kind of goes away. So those two perform more like mattes in this palette than they do anything else, even if you spray them. This red and this yellow are really pretty satin shades. I love them so, so very much. These two, again, so, so pretty shimmers. I didn't get any pictures of my eye looks with this palette because I just wasn't hugely happy with any of the eye looks that I had with this palette. I really struggled with this palette this week. The eye look that I have on today is probably one of my favorite eye looks from what I've been able to create with this palette, but this eye look took me easily an hour to do, and I just don't have that time in the morning to work with a shadow. I continued to find myself going over, buffing out, going over, buffing out, going over, buffing out multiple times to get this eye look to look like it does. I'm happy with this eye look today. It's probably the best one that I've come up with this palette in the last week, but it did, like I said, take me an awful long time to get this eye look today, and I don't have that kind of time in the morning. What I will say about this palette is, you guys know, if I am doing a palette roulette, I will use it multiple ways to see if it's better one way or another. I have used this palette with eye primers. I have used this palette with an eye primer without a base shade over the top. I have used it with an eye primer with a base shade over the top, and I have used it without eye primer. I find that it doesn't work hugely well anyway, but it does work better with an eye primer and a base over the top. Today I'm wearing no eye primer, and I am wearing a base shadow down first so that the shadows have something to blend with, just because I find that it kind of just goes away on your eye throughout the day. Like, it just, with an eye primer, it stays a tad bit longer, but I will tell you, I put my makeup on at, 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, and then I don't take it off again until 10 o'clock at night. Or maybe 9 o'clock at night. Let's say 9 o'clock at night. When I go in with most of my eyeshadows, you can still see my eyeshadow pretty clearly. You clearly can tell that there was an eye look there. Anyway, I used this palette, so with an eye primer, without an eye primer, with a base, without a base, it was gone on my eyes. My lid was gone, and I have hooded eyes, slightly hooded eyes. So, sometimes in the crease area, my eyeshadow will dissipate, but it very rarely happens on the lid. These shadows, for whatever reason, would be entirely gone. Like, you might be able to see a little bit up here in like my brow bone area, but the brow bone color would be gone, and the lid color would be gone. The outer V color would be gone. It was just weird. Like, I don't understand why it was doing that, and maybe I was fooling myself a year ago. If that was how this was performing a year ago, I didn't notice because I was so enamored by this palette. But this year, I can tell you, I know more about makeup, I know more about eyeshadow formulas, and I know that this isn't my favorite, and I know that I have less expensive eyeshadows that last far more time than these even attempted to last on my eyes. If I was in the market to declutter my palettes, I would probably declutter this one this week. I can see me reaching for it for certain shades. Like I said, I love these two colors down here. This red called Stigmata and this yellow called Relic are just beautiful satin colors that bring a huge pop of color to any eye look. This red I am actually wearing in my crease today, which I don't typically wear red. I don't typically wear satins in my crease at all, but I don't find that this one creates any kind of texture that's not there, which a lot of satins do, and it doesn't also highlight the texture of my eyes, you know, I am an older one on the planet, so my eyes aren't exactly as taut as they were when I was 20. So I do have a little bit of crepiness, and sometimes satin colors will bring out the crepiness in your eyes, and I don't find that that red did that. And I wore them in the crease a lot. This yellow I wore on my lid a couple times over this week. This blue Ministry is a beautiful satin blue color as well, but didn't go with a whole lot that I was putting on my eyes this week. I like this palette. I just don't love it. And it was an expensive palette. So in addition to the gift card that my son gave me, I also spent an additional $20 with taxes and everything else to get the palette, and I have to say it's not my favorite. I think what I may do is depot some of the shadows in this palette that I do love and keep those, and just get rid of the other ones, because a lot of these colors I do have in my collection elsewhere, and the ones that I don't, I can keep, but a lot of them just do not blend very well. This is probably the worst one, this shade called Crucifix, this dark brown, but the black is not an amazing black. It's called Sabbath, and therefore you would think that it was just black as night, and it is just not. It's just not an amazing black. This Ashes isn't an amazing color. Revolution is not an amazing color. I don't use either one of those topper shades ever. And when I do, I have glitter all over myself, so that reminds me why I don't use them. The two base shades in here, this Amen and Baptism, they're really nice mattes. Most of the mattes in here are really silky smooth to the touch, very nice products to use. You would think they'd be easy to use, but they're just not. They're not anything that's unheard of in the rest of my collection, so I don't necessarily need them. This baby pink color is probably the most unique of the base shades that I have in my collection, but I still don't think that I love it enough that I would keep it. I used the poop out of this palette when I first got it, and I used the poop out of it over this last week, and you can barely tell that I've used it at all. So they are pretty hard pressed, I would say, and maybe that's why I am struggling with getting enough product on my brush to easily blend out something, but I may depot this and just keep the colors out of it that I want. I do find that there are several colors in here that would be unique to my collection, but several that just wouldn't be. I didn't really have the best time with this palette. If you guys like Kat Von D and you do get your hands on this, I'm not saying that you would hate it. You probably wouldn't hate it. But I have just found since being in this industry that this isn't the most amazing formula that I've come across. And that's okay with me. I'm okay with that. I'm not saying that, however, I need everybody to understand I'm not saying that because of the Kat Von D canceled nature of YouTube right now. I love her liquid lipsticks. Probably will continue to buy her liquid lipsticks. There are other palettes of hers that I'd like to try, but I think she reformulated. I'm not sure if this was the reformulation or not. I really wanted the Metal Matte palette that came out, I think, the Christmas before this one, and didn't get my hands on it because wasn't into the beauty scene long enough to even know it existed until after it had sold out and wasn't available anymore. So I will probably depot a lot of what's in here and keep it or toss it. So I'm sorry I am not doing swatches for you guys today of this palette. There's just so many colors, and I think it would just be hugely boring, and because of the nature of YouTube and Kat Von D, I think also nobody would be interested. So let's just get into choosing a new palette for next week. I have to tell you, I'm really super excited to choose a new palette for next week. The app that I use is called Decide Now. I do have a Samsung Galaxy Note 9, and it is an app that is on the Play Store for Android. This is what it looks like. It just has a little wheel that is kind of like Wheel of Fortune that you put all of your palettes into, and I did get a couple new palettes with my BoxyCharm and my Ipsy that aren't in here yet. That's okay. I have the rest of my palettes in here, and then what I am going to do is just pop it, spin the wheel, and it's going to choose a new palette for me to work with next week. This app was an app that I searched out because Danny uses a Wheel of Fortune app very similar to this in her Palette a Week series, in which she uses as a declutter series. This is how she chooses her palette. So this is a very similar, this is a very similar app to the one that she uses, and I just found an app store version of it. She has an iPhone, I do believe. So I'm going to go ahead and spin the wheel right now. My friend JC, my little chat head there, is trying to get a hold of me. So the palette that was chosen for me this week is the Urban Decay Electric palette. It is honestly one of my very favorite palettes. It's super colorful. What I can say about this palette is I have no problems using it, but I am gonna have to bring some neutral-ish tones into my usage of it this week, so I will be using my single shadows with it this week. But let me go get that palette. Hi guys, I'm back. So while editing my video, I realized the last half of my Palette Roulette video, not last half, I guess last couple minutes of my Palette Roulette video was gone. Do you guys recognize this? This is the blanket that I received from a FatFitFun box. And I'm using it as a scarf shawl thing because I am freezing to death. But also, like, I think that I love scarves. Whatever I do, I love scarves. I should show you guys my collection one day. Let me know if you'd be interested in that. I have quite a few. Okay, so I'm going to re-record. So this is take 2 of the outro, I guess, of my Palette Roulette series. So this is the Urban Decay palette. I am so excited to use it. This is pretty iconic here on YouTube. This was a palette that I purchased approximately 2 years ago, 2 Decembers, 2 Januaries ago. I think I purchased it in December and received it in January after purchasing a palette for my daughter for Christmas. This one I picked up for myself, and they can't call it a eyeshadow palette because it has some colors in here that are not considered eye safe in the States. So they call it the Urban Decay Electric Pressed Pigment Palette. And this is what it looks like. It does have a pretty good sized mirror here. So I'm going to try not to blind you with that. But as you can see, I have used this palette multiple times. I'm not afraid of this palette. And I am super stoked to be using it next week for my Palette Roulette series. I think this color here, Slow Burn, is really the only color I haven't used a whole lot. I do have a video up using this palette the first time I ever used this palette. I also have quite a few videos up, one of which I did a collab with my friend Lisa I, who I love and adore with this palette because this is the palette that brought us together. So I will never get rid of this palette, and I think anybody who has this palette will say the same thing. I will never get rid of this palette. But I am so stoked to use this palette next week. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. I hope that if you did, that you're gonna give it a big thumbs up. It really does help my channel. I also hope that you enjoyed me enough that you're considering subscribing to my channel. I would love to have you stick around and see you in the comments section of my videos. I do have a quite close-knit family right now. My channel is you know, only a year and a half old. It's very slow growing. I am able to keep in contact with everybody who comments in my comment section, which I love so very much. I hope that you guys are having a fabulous Monday and that you will continue to have a fabulous week. And until next time, guys, bye.